We're always fashionably late here at the Floxies community, but nevertheless, we're here after all. So happy Wonder Wednesday, everyone. I hope you're doing well wherever in the world you're joining us from. And I hope that you're looking after yourselves as well, because I don't know about you, but at the end of the year, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of things to wrap up, and it can feel quite stressful. So please do look after yourselves. I should do that too. We're about to get started our presentation today. So as you know, we get together here every Wednesday for our live streams, and we host them from our metaverse, which I'm about to show you. So, and as per usual, I would like to keep our streams as interactive as possible. I can't speak today, clearly. So please do drop a message in the chat, do a comment in the chat. Let me know who's watching us right now, where from, and if you've used Rive before or not. All right, enough of me blabbing. Let's get into the metaverse. Awesome. And hi, Penny. Let's go on to the auditorium, I guess. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Happy Wonder Wednesday. I was doing a little blabbing as usual, my little introductions, and clearly I cannot speak today because I'm on the very last legs of this year, but I'm really excited that we get to wrap up the year with a final stream. And I told Joshua Fry, our guest today, that we're wrapping up with a bang because this event has been highly, I don't know, hyped, I guess, from our community. Everyone was waiting for it. So I was really, really happy to hear that you had accepted our invitation, Joshua. And for those of you here who don't know Joshua, he's one of the Webflow legends out there, but also a great designer, Webflow developer. And lately, what should we call somebody that uses Rive? A River? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, River. Let's take that. I like
Yeah, a River, a driver River. And Joshua, welcome to the Floxies. It's so great to have you here. I wanted to ask you, what's all the hype? You know, why is everyone raving about Rive?
it. I think part of it is just that the things that are coming out of it like look very exciting. Really, like there's so much potential for what you can do. But also, I mean, for me, I've only been using it for like 6 months or something. Most of the projects I'm working on will often be like Webflow projects or longer term design things, and it's hard to get like nice output out of it. Whereas I've had like several kind of posts for social media that have been quite popular just because you're very quickly able to produce like quite funky looking stuff. But then also just because the things that you make in Rive obviously are like production ready assets, and people are able to um, use them across like Framer and Webflow, but also like any other environment. So, and with it being like fully no code, it kind of gives designers like me who like to be in a visual environment the opportunity to actually make those assets rather than just making like prototypes and things like that, and then having someone else reproduce them.
And going back to those people here who might have not met you before, I was very lucky to meet you during the Webflow Conf and actually to be, I guess, on this journey ever since I started. You've been in my circle of people to look up to. So, but I know that you're also the founder at Fry UX. You're a senior designer, Webflow developer. When did you get started, and what's keeping you passionate these days?
I mean, well, thanks first of all, but I mean, I feel like I look up to you, so maybe that's something that's good about this community, that we all have different skills to look up to each other for. But yeah, how did I get started? I mean, I studied psychology when I was younger, but I was also kind of making websites for fun, and it took me a while to realize that that was actually like a job.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I went into a startup as a psychologist, but then realized that the UX team was doing stuff that resonated with me and sort of seemed to have a lot of skills in common with that. And transitioned into that, and then started freelancing. And I discovered Webflow at kind of the same time because I was trying to learn like CSS and JavaScript and that kind of stuff, and struggling a bit because it just wasn't really like my way of doing things. And so as soon as I found Webflow, that kind of took over. And yeah, my main freelancing thing is still like UX and design, do a lot of like app work and a lot of that early stage information architecture and those kind of things. But I've also done sort of Webflow on the side as lot of sort of direct smaller clients, those kind of things. Yeah, and then I mean I can get into Rive stuff. I have a bit of a presentation if it's a good time
Yes,
to.
please, by all means. Last week we had, or 2 weeks ago, Jack Redley presenting Spline, and so we've been surfing that wave of 3D motion interaction, and Rive was definitely, as I mentioned, something that the community really wanted to explore a little bit more, as well as GSAP. Next year we'll have to get someone here for GSAP. And I know
Yeah.
that we have some people in the community that are currently training and using it quite a lot. Looking at you, Carlan.
Yeah, it's all very exciting. I feel like it's a super exciting time for the web and for like Webflow people, just because there's so many opportunities now to do more exciting things. There's also like WebGL stuff is interesting to me, and there's a few people playing with like visual WebGL editors. So that's another realm. I just feel like there's going to be so many toys for us to use. Let me share my screen.
Awesome. And I'm going to say hi to Jinko, who's watching from Canada. Hi, Jinko.
Also, yeah, just thank you so much for having me here. It's great to be part of a Floxies event. Like I've been following the stuff that you've been doing for so long, and it's an honor to be on this stage surrounded by these beautiful Christmas trees.
It's our pleasure. I can't believe you've only just come now for the first time. We'll have to have you back.
I'm just going to share this first of all, which is I've started. I haven't finished. I need to add some additional links, but I've started just putting together a bunch of resources that are related to this talk. And so I'm going to share this link, and I'll just drop it in the chat. But if there's anywhere else useful for that to be, then that exists, and I will flesh it out more. But yeah, I've also made this lovely presentation, and it's a very busy time in December, and I knew that if I got into designing this thing nicely, then I would spend too long on that part, and I wanted to focus on the things I wanted to tell you. So we have this beautiful, passionate graphic design.
It is quite beautiful. I love it.
Thanks. And there is a warning as well for like flashing and moving images, just like there's quite a lot of GIFs in this, just in case that is a problem for anyone. You might want to not have the screen share on.
Appreciate that.
Cool. So today we will try to cover, but don't hold me to it. What is Rive? What can you do with it? My experience with it, a bit of an interface walkthrough, some of the basics, and maybe touching on advanced things if we have time, a bit of a demo build and how you integrate with Webflow, and then what are the actual like use cases for this and resources. I've already shown you the sheet for that. So what is Rice? So the reason I put this in is because you will realize quickly as soon as you start writing the word Rive a lot, it gets corrected to Rice pretty much every time. But this is a very beautiful Rive animation of some rice. So I thought that would be a nice first shot.
And did you make that with Rive, of course?
I did not make this. This is just a community file that I found when I typed in rice.
Nice.
This is the person here. But I'll show you the community in a minute because there's so many great things on there. So what is Rive? Spelled correctly. So interactive animated graphics. So you can make just traditional like looping animations as well. You can even just export as movies and GIFs. It's not quite as advanced in After Effects in delivering that because it's not really what it's for, but you can also make all of those things interactive. These are production-ready graphics, as I've said, and they're very lightweight, particularly if you stay in vector mode. So you can bring images in, you can bring like PNGs, JPEGs, and PSDs into it. And obviously then you're looking at the weight of those files as well. Same if you bring in sound, which is also possible, but you will have the weight of your sound files. And then they have kind of two main products. I think they may be calling their renderer a third product now, but that's just a technical detail. They have the editor, which is in browser and also on like standalone application, and they have their runtimes, which are the pieces of code that allow Rive files to be run on all of these platforms. So Webflow and Framer have just like a very straightforward no-code type integration. The rest of them, I mean, I would need someone else to help me integrate with those. But you can also use like the JS web runtime inside Webflow. Not that I particularly know how to do it, but Jeff McAvoy, who I've probably mentioned a couple of times, is your guy for that. And that just gives you a little bit more control over it than what they haven't got to building into the integration yet. And it's free as well, which I think like there's maybe some misconceptions around the pricing of it. I've seen some people saying I don't want to pay $32 a month, which is expensive, I know, but you don't really need to in order to get started, or in order to do quite a lot of stuff, really. So you can have unlimited personal files and 3 collaborative files, similar to Figma. And you can actually export those files and use them in Webflow or wherever it is you want to use them, all as part of it. And there's 2 files that you can export, and they just made it so that you can do both. It was previously only the .riv, which is the one you actually use when you add it to your project. But there's also a .rev file, which is like a backup file, which stores like everything that would be in the editor, so that you can back them up to your hard drive, or you can share them with other people to open in the editor as well. So they just added that to the free plan. So it really is quite flexible, and you can get a long way. The reasons that I have upgraded mine is just because you are using, like, it's basically you're paying for the cloud storage, so to have unlimited history and unlimited files. Otherwise it will sort of wipe some of that stuff over time, but you can back it up. But then also fonts and audio. If you want to use text a lot, then you're probably going to want to use custom fonts at some point. And personally, I like messing around with sound, so that's why I upgraded. Although saying that, like, I think one of the best uses for Rive stuff, particularly in Webflow, is like staying on the graphic side rather than getting into text, because when you put it inside inside Webflow, it will be inside like a canvas element, which means that it's not as accessible if you have text. It won't be like read by screen readers and things like that. So you have to consider accessibility and use like ARIA labels and those kind of things. So yeah, it may not be the biggest consideration for most of the projects that you would use it for. What I'm saying is you can do a lot for free, and I recommend that you do. So what can you do? Well, a lot. These are all gifts that are like a bit choppy and fast, which is what the warning was for. But this is just some of the examples of the crazy things. So you can create graphics for interfaces and for games, and you can see all these like really quite sophisticated things. People have used it for like in-car navigations, watch stuff. Don't know what to call that. Like smart fridges and all kinds of it, because it is so like widely usable with these different runtimes. You can pretty much use Rive graphics for anything. So the potential of it is great. Like if you learn this skill in order to do stuff in Webflow, that will also be transferable across all of those different places. So then just like a few specific examples just to show this is using it on the left with like actual raster images. So you can like apply a mesh, and then you can rig that mesh, and you can do everything that you would do with a vector graphic once you've done that. This is someone called Drawsgood, who's a senior animator at Rive. And he also did this example, which is showing like how, although Rive isn't really natively 3D, you can kind of do 3D effects using like rotations and scales and things. So you can get quite a lot of 3D appearance with it. And then this is just showing as well, there's a lot of people using Rive who have come from traditional animation, and so there's a lot of this kind of like character stuff, but people are excited to make it interactive so that this animation is actually following the mouse, but also you can see they've like rigged the hair so that it moves in a more natural way and that kind of thing. So you can get really quite advanced with it. What can I do? Well, this is the first example of me getting into animation. When I was a teenager, I used to do stupid little movies about myself as a kind of rubbish superhero. That's how I started animating. But then I kind of experimented with it over the years in different things. So like Procreate, an app called Loom as well on the iPad, which I really enjoy. Doing stuff in Figma with just like the prototyping, linking things up. Using Figma to Lottie to do, is that one moving? Yeah, to do that. I don't know what this one, the bottom left one was some kind of pandemic-induced madness where I'm holding a pineapple.
It's quite creative.
Um,
It's like for an advertising sort of thing. It's quite good.
Thanks. And then this is like just stuff in After Effects, which I never got really deep into. But yeah, I was doing bits for like on top of video and that kind of thing. But I think that none of these things really ever fully clicked for me. Like the Loom is really fun to play with, but not that usable outside of it. Figma is kind of clunky, and it annoys me that people have to reproduce it, or that you can't really like these had to be screen captured, I think, in order to have an animation out of it. So yeah, none of that really stuck with me, but I was always interested in the idea. And then I think that Webflow is the thing where I actually have really enjoyed doing like more interactive animation with IX. This moves really quickly, so I'll just show you like this one. This is before I had discovered Rive, but it's a really good example of where I would use it now, where I'm sort of making all of this stuff flash and move just with IX2. But if I was using Rive, I could actually have the interactive pads and maybe even make sounds, and things like this where it's responding to the scroll and doing something cool. But it's just like quite difficult to build within Webflow a lot of the time and not very intuitive to me. Like the timeline thing makes a lot more sense. Hopefully we're going to see that kind of thing a bit with GSAP as well. So I'm interested to see like where the crossover is going to be and what stuff I will still do in Rive versus using that. But that remains to be seen. Let's go back to here. And then
I'm gonna stop sharing the screen for 1 second, just because I just checked on YouTube and there's some issues with your audio. So I'm just gonna stop screaming for 1 sec. Let's see if that fixes it. Or if you have some sort of too many things open. But I can hear you just fine on Gather. It's just the stream. Or does everyone else? Can you all hear it quite well? Yeah, it's just the stream. Yeah, I had the same issue, so I don't know whether it's like because sharing too many things all at once. But well, we can try. But yeah, I can hear you just fine here. But
okay, should I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. But yeah, like I said, I was working full time at the startup that made that last website. But sadly, that company went out of business in May, which meant I have gone back to freelancing. But I was able to take some time out and spend time learning Rive, which is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. And so then over the last 6 months, these are just a few examples of just kind of like, of things that I've built. Oh, there we go. In that 6 months, so I made like this interactive beat machine thing. This is an example of like a header hero interactive. This is a whole scene where you can click on different things. This is a brand animation for Ben Hammond, some of you may know. This is a clonable interactive background. This is a project for Imogen Heap on the header. This is a hero graphic. And that's also part of Ben Hammond's work. And then various different experiments where I'm interacting and creating stuff.
And that is all very, very cool. But how do we make this stuff?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Yeah, and so I'm still kind of impressed myself that I've been able to do all of those things. I kind of like have always felt that some of that more like creative developer stuff is a bit outside of my my zone, but Rive has really unlocked a lot of those things for me. So yeah, let's well actually first, before I show you the actual Rive editor, I just wanted to go into the community files. Oh, okay, that would have been better to just stay there. Well, let's look at this example anyway. This is an example on the community. This is not something I've made, but it's a very like advanced and lovely looking animation. But what I think is interesting about it is that on the community, you can also see all of the inputs down here. So Rive files have inputs, which are the things that sort of allow the developer to manipulate what's happening with the animation. And that's what will be exposed to you in Webflow as well if you use a Rive file there. So you can see you've got a Boolean, which is just a switch on off, which says that the game has been completed. So this would be, for example, used after someone's played a game, then they fall into this screen, and then the developer says, like, after 1 second, switch game completed on, or whatever it might be. And then they can also configure what's the badge, what's the appearance that they're going to have for whatever it is that they achieved in that game, what flag design are we going to have. If they won, they get a victory, and how many stars did they get. And they can plug that in, and then the Rive file will just do all of the work for them. So it's this production ready asset that they can just drop in, pass those parameters to, and it does exactly what they want. So I really liked that example. And then also just on the community, you can preview these in Rive just in the browser and see how they're made. But also I recommend just remixing them. It will give you a copy of the file to your space in Rive, and you can like fully dissect it, similar to Spline. You can take things apart and see how they're built. And that's actually the main way that I've learned to do stuff. It's just kind of finding things on the community that I enjoy, picking them apart and making kind of my own version of that.
That's what I was thinking about as well. Like even, with Jack, we looked at how the community was kind of providing great templates for people to just undo and keep start practicing and learning on the job, if you like. So
exactly, it's amazing. I feel like people are so generous with all of this stuff. I need to get my act together and start sharing some more myself as well. But it's really great just to see like
you should start a Rive challenge. You should start a Rive challenge.
A Rive challenge.
Hmm.
Okay, yeah, I'm into that. I actually there's kind of a bit of an ongoing challenge I feel with like people starting out and doing things like this, which is all based on the same principle, but there's like a lot of variation with what you can do. So this is actually all like one single animation that's just repeated across the board, and it just like leads to this really nice bounce interact effect. And I'll show you how to do that. And I'd love to see if anyone gives that a try, because that's one of the first things that I did, and it's really easy to get going with. But yeah, there's lots you can look at here. I also I show this to my daughter sometimes because she likes just choosing a file and going in and playing around with them and just like, what does this one do, and all that sort of stuff. So it's just quite a fun place to play as well. So I'm going to switch over to actual Rive. So this is like a blank file that I've made that hopefully I'm going to create some useful stuff for you in today. And if it is reasonably useful, then I'll give you the file as well, and you can open that up in your own copy of Rive. So when you start a new file, you will be invited to create an artboard. And the default is just 500 by 500, so that's what this is. But you have an infinite canvas similar to Figma, and you can just create as many artboards as you want. The thing to bear in mind is that in reality, you would try and limit that as much as possible, because that's the file that you're actually going to be using in your project. So if you had like lots of different animations across a Webflow site, for example, you might split that into multiple files so that you're only loading the one on the page that you need to keep file size low. But often they come out about 50 kilobytes, so it's not too bad. Yeah, at the top here we have the hierarchy, which is just going to be similar to Figma or Webflow, where you've got everything that's in the scene on the artboard. And you have your assets over here, which is where your images. You can have Lottie files as well, and fonts and audio if you are on the paid plan. And then up the top we have like your basic tools, so various select tools, frame create, that's not a word, is it? Createment. Arrangement tools, that's a much better term. We have like shape creating stuff, bones and joysticks, which is a bit more advanced, but maybe we'll touch on that. Text and event tools. I probably won't go into events because it's a bit much, but basically what that allows you to do is send signals between artboards. So I'm might just quickly jump across. This is the first project that I decided to do, which was kind of like a baptism of fire for using Rive, because I was following a YouTube tutorial where someone had made like a playable keyboard, and I wanted to do the same kind of thing with like an MPC style beat machine. So this is like a whole thing that has like animations on the screen here, and then it has buttons over here that trigger animations on the left. And it has a lot of different timelines and artboards and things embedded. But the events thing is that's like I've embedded this button here. I've made multiple copies of it over here, and whenever I press it, I need to trigger things, and so that triggers an event on the button, which makes everything else happen. But you really don't need to get into that kind of business straight away. I would recommend starting with something less crazy, because this almost broke me. So I think the best way to start is just looking at like drawing. So we have basic shape tools over here. So for example, I can make a circle. And one of the things you'll notice straight away is that we've got this sort of orientation stuff here. And this is really important because, first of all, if you're animating, like you will want to be moving things from one position to the other, but like within one dimension at a time. So rather than just sort of dragging something over here, you want to make sure you're only moving in the x-axis, so you can grab this arrow to do that. And equally, if you grab the little part of it, then you can stretch it out. And the same with this one. And then the yellow one rotates, but we're not going to see much because it's a circle. But that's useful. And then also if you hit the Y key, you can move where that is relative to the shape, which is really important. And you hit it again to leave it there. So now that's like the origin of the shape, which is useful because, say if I scaled it before, it would have scaled into the middle, whereas now it's going to scale down to that point. And so a lot of the animations you are going to want to make with Rive, like you will have kind of an origin point where you want things to come from. So I'll show an example of that as well in a bit. So at circle, you have your fills and strokes and stuff over here. You have your opacity here. You have the size and the actual position of that origin, and the scale here, rotations. This stuff, slightly more advanced things, but you can, for example, like clip is like masking it by something else. So I could mask the circle with a rectangle. Constraints allow it to only move in certain ways. And draw order allows you to change like whether it's above and below things, which you might need to do during animation. So by default, everything that's higher up in the hierarchy will appear on front, but you might want to move it up or down. Everything starts with a fill and never a stroke, even if it's a line. So it's useful to add strokes a lot of the time. And I'll just make this a nice color as well. I say nice color. It's purple. There you go. You can add like stars, for example. I have thought a little bit about what I'm drawing here, but I don't know what it's going to come out like. So here's a star. What's really nice actually in the Rive interface is that anything like this you can actually drag up and down, which I've got so used to now, and it annoys me that it's not in Figma. But you can just hold and drag, and then you get like additional points, for example, on that star there. And then you've got like your pen tools so that you can draw shapes. There we go. I'll just take this. I'm going to try and make a kind of. If I control click on the point, then it gives it Bezier curves like that, and I can.
So similar to Figma a little bit, that part.
Similar to Figma, like there's slight nuances in the way it works, but pretty much the same thing. What's really cool as well is you can see we always have like the shape and then the path within it, and you can go in and edit all the individual vertices, and you get like quite granular control over all of this stuff. which means that you can actually like animate changes in the vector in a lot of detail. Or you can make like, if you were doing something with following the mouse, then you could make the handles or the root of the curve follow the mouse or follow another object. So you can get really complex with that stuff.
And I know that we're talking about a bunch of things here, and I just wanted to check with the community. If anyone has any questions, like at any point in time, please drop them in the chat. We want to make sure that you're all following and you're getting some good value from it. So please do use the chat if you're confused or if you want to ask a few questions.
But
No,
yeah,
I think you
basically,
are. I think you are. It's just a lot to cover, especially if it's the first time that that we're seeing it. And I don't know about other people here, but for me, I feel just like, oh, I just want to play with it now and become a
yeah,
master straight away.
that's what it's about.
Oh, we do have
So
a
yeah,
question from Irina. Can you import SVGs in Rive and manipulate them?
you can. So I dragged in earlier just an SVG, which so you can just export your SVG from Figma or download something from the web or whatever your client's giving you, and you drop it into Rive, and it will come up in the assets panel here. And so then you can just drop that in, and I've got my Floxies logo.
Cute.
And then you can do whatever you want with that. So I'll divert onto this briefly. So what's interesting about that is that you need to kind of do some preparation if you're working with other people's graphics, because you got to think about what the animation is you want to do and how that is going to play out. So for example, here I looked at this one a bit already, and I found that like I wanted to individually animate the petals, but there's currently a group that are all the backgrounds of the petals, whereas I kind of want the backgrounds to be maybe part of the petal itself. So you might want to like nest things differently inside each other. I'm not going to say that this is going to be good because there's going to be detail to consider here, but I might want to like bring that background. Wait, have I even got the right one? Probably not. Let me start again.
I wonder
That
if you
is
can
the
also turn
background.
them all into one petal and then it kind of opens up. That'd be nice as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Exactly the kind of idea that we need. Okay, so let's do something like that. I'll bring all the backgrounds inside. So it means that there's going to be an overlap here where there was a transparency before, but let's just ignore that detail point for now. So now all of the petals should each be kind of combined with that one. But so like I was talking about the origin point before, we're probably going to want the origin of the petal to be like down here somewhere. And then the same for each of these. And that means that when we now like rotate the petals, they are gonna rotate from where we want them to. So I hit Y again. If I rotate this one now, done something wrong. Live demos. Well, there you go, that example. So now I could like fold them in that way. And I don't know what I did with this one, but maybe someone else saw it. It's working. So I could now say all of those start there. I would probably, in reality, right, I would probably leave them in their default position, like that, and then wait till I'm animating to make changes. So if I switch over here from design to animate, this is where we're gonna enter Rive World, really. You'll see you have a state machine and a timeline, but we're just gonna look at the timeline first of all. If I wanted to key all of those rotations, then I would say I want them to all start there. So start at 0 on that one, and I'm just hitting the diamond there to create a keyframe for that custom shape, which ideally also I would name like petal 1. And then I'll do the same for this petal, and I'll do the same for this petal. And then I might want to make sure I have the same keyframes all at the end, so I can just select them all and copy them, paste them over here. And then I might want to do something in the middle. So I'm going to make them kind of go into the center this is not going to be the world's greatest animation, I'm afraid. So then they're going to go in and out again, right?
It's quite nice.
Thanks. And then I might want to like change the interpolation of that a little bit. So if you're moving from one frame to another, then you're interpolating. So this will change. If I change the interpolation on these two here, it will change how it moves from the first frame to these middle points. So if I make that like a sort of elastic ping one, which is one of the built-in ones there, then that first movement between those two is going to kind of ping, and then it's going to just, again, linear back out. Maybe I want the back out one to be just like a slow start and a bit of a fast finish like that. Let's just go like a curve like that. So that might not be your final thing, but then you can also then loop that. So if I just switch the type to loop, then it's going to do this.
And you can obviously like ease in and ease out and add more effects, I guess, right?
Yeah, so all the easing is on this panel here. You can have like completely custom ones, and then you can copy and paste the values as well if you want to keep using the same kind of interpolation over and over again. You can also see all of this on like a graph, but I don't really use that mode. And the timing of it, you can sometimes if you've done quite a complex animation, you want to make it longer or shorter. It's quite a fuss to move everything. So I might want to change this to 4 seconds and then replace everything. But instead of doing that, you can just set this to like 0.25 on the playback speed, and that will have the same effect of making it like much slower. So you can really tweak with your timing without having to redo everything. So that's super useful. If I have a timeline like that, I can right-click on the timeline and add it to a render queue and just set up my export and export it as a GIF or a video or something. But obviously, most of the time, that's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to do something more interactive. I think I might show you that on this. I'm worried about time a little bit, but if I try and like zoom through a few things that I wanted to do on this, is that cool?
Yeah, sure. And I'm keeping an eye out for questions and things in the chat. So you're so far so
Cool.
good.
So I'm going to just add a rectangle to this. And if I go in and edit this path, it's going to ask me to convert it to like a custom shape, which I've just done. So it's no longer a mere rectangle. I'm going to curve the bottom areas of this, and I'm going to make it red. It looks like a rubbish nose at the moment, but I've got a trick up my sleeve. So one of the things I mentioned before was constraints, which constrain it to different things. So I'm going to constrain this with a follow path and have it follow the shape that I made down there for the mouth, which I did wrong. You go into these settings here and click target and select that target. And now it's on that path. But you'll notice it's kind of at the end and on the middle. And so one thing we need to change is that the position of, okay, I'll undo the follow path. I want to change the position that it's going to constrain to. I love live demos. I'll get this again, and now it'll be kind of like tongue-like underneath the mouth. I'm going to place it underneath so that it's hidden by it. And then on this shape that I just made, which I definitely know which one it is here, I can set the distance of that follow path. So choose where it is. So then that allows me to like follow like this. And anything I change on that original path that it's following, if I were to like come in here and make it like this, then it's going to follow that instead. So everything is now tied to that path. So this is a really useful one because there's a lot that you can achieve by following a path, and that mouth could be like invisible, for example, and it could be like letting me animate something around the page in a particular way, or like if you wanted something to follow down as you scroll down a page, something like that. I just want this mouth to be a little bit smilier. Look at that. Lovely. Another one that I think is really useful is on the stroke option. You can do a similar thing of like following a path, but it's just sort of following its own path, which you do with setting the stroke to sequential trim. And that is going to allow me to, I've done everything. See, I've actually just done a common error, which is I've done a load of stuff in animate mode because I was talking about it and getting wrapped up. But this stuff that I've just done to this tongue, for example, wasn't done in design mode, so it only exists over here. But I'm just going to move past that. So the sequential trim, you can set the sort of beginning and end of this circle movement. So then that can be keyed, and that's the reason I noticed what I was doing wrong, because I'm keying everything in this little animation down here. But if I wanted it to be 0 at the start of the animation and 100 at the end, then that would get drawn in. And then, for example, with our tongue, we might make that be this distance here and this distance here, so it switches back and forth. Okay, and so I'm getting I'm again like horrible animation results, but you're seeing some of the principles hopefully. I'm going to make this star rotate, and then I'm going to set all of this to loop. Yeah, we're good. So then that'll just animate through that glorious animation over and over again. So I wanted to show you how you then make this interactive. So if one of the things that's really useful is kind of using shapes, but not actually having them visible. So this is going to be what we call a listener. And I'm going to get rid of its fill so that you can't see it, but it still exists there. And that's going to be listening for when my mouse is hovering over it. This is the way we get into the state machine. So if I go in here and create a listener, I'm going to choose the target, which is that big rectangle we just made. And I'm going to say this is hover. And then I'm going to duplicate that and make another one called hover off. And then what I need is an input, and that's the thing that we were talking about before that gets exposed to the developer or to your Webflow file. I'm going to use a Boolean, which is just an on-off switch, and that's going to say hovering. Can't write the word hovering. Yes or no. So the settings for our listeners over here, I'm going to say, I already chose the rectangle as the listener. I'm going to say, when the pointer enters, I want you to turn hovering to true. And then when the pointer exits, I'm going to turn hovering to false. So that's set up just a system that if I press play on here now, you're going to see this little tick down here just turning on and off when I hover. Our animation is still just looping round and round. I set these up beforehand. I'm going to get rid of them again. Right. We need to have a default animation for when you start the scene that where nothing is happening, basically. So what I'm going to do is take all of the values from the beginning of this animation, which are these ones, which should be how everything is set up before it starts, and just paste them into default. And then in the state machine, I'm going to put the default animation and the crazy animation. And when we enter, so on entry, it's going to go to default, which is going to do nothing. Just sort of put it in that position. And then when something happens, we're going to move to the crazy. And when something else happens, we're going to move to the default. And we're going to use that input that we set up. Hope you're following. This is the bit that's like, it took me a while to get my head fully around all these different places where you set these things up. But once you understand this system, it's incredibly powerful and you can do so much with it. So, like, don't feel bad if you're not quite keeping up with all of these different bits. You kind of need to do it 2 or 3 times before you get it. And I will give you this file so you can see how I've set it up as well.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm getting a sense as well that given the time that we have as well, and we will play with this. And I saw a question
yeah.
in the chat about how do we integrate this with Webflow. I feel, and given that the audio on the stream is what it is, I think we will have you back as well for another Webflow plus Rive, because this is like a great intro that I'm loving so far. And we'll have time to play around with it during the holidays. And then we can have you back in the new year and see how we can integrate it into the Webflow sites.
I mean, I am very close if you want me to just very quickly show that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I wasn't
So,
sure how many more aces up your sleeves you had.
I think I'm almost there. Like, so this has just set it so that when hovering is true, it's going to animate, and when it's not, it's not. So now whenever we hover over that invisible rectangle, it's going to start animating. When we take it off, it's not. The animation and everything isn't perfect, but let's just export it and see what happens if we bring it into Webflow. So export here, and I'm going to make this Floxies.riv, replace that earlier version that I had of it. And then I have a Webflow file here ready for it. So you can just use Command E or K. Oh, there's some controversy around that, isn't there? Bring in a Rive file. It's got this little van by default for some reason. It's always there, but you can see my unemployment file, as I call it. Bring in this Rive file. One thing that's really important once you've got this in is to kind of match your aspect ratio from Rive. So if you have something that's not like 1-to-1, like this one happens to be, then it's quite useful to use the exact dimensions of your artboard as a custom aspect ratio. We're going to go with 1 and 1. And then this should actually just work straight away, I think. Oh, no, I forgot a thing. We were close. If we go into settings here, we need to select the artboard, which was draw, and select the state machine. And now it will work. So now when you hover over that, it's going to trigger the thing. So this is just the Rive file, like raw in there, doing whatever I got the Rive file to do. So that's like our starting point. But then if you wanted to use Webflow interactions to interact with that, you can go in here and have, like, for example, a mouse click animation and say on first click, I want to start an animation. Just call that Rive. Select my Rive file, hit add up here and choose the Rive element. And then inside here, choose my state machine, and I get my inputs. So this is what I've been talking about the whole time, that we have those inputs that we can access. I can say, when you click that button, I want you to turn that hovering action to true. So now you've got a Webflow element interacting with that. And on the second element, I'm going to just duplicate this thing, give us Rive 2, and switch that hovering off again. So now I can still, hopefully, do it by hovering, but I can also do it by clicking on and off on this button.
Can you do a look at? I love a look at, or following the cursor. That's my favorite. I don't know why. I just like to play around with websites following the cursor.
Yeah, so you can absolutely do that. With using like Webflow with it, it's a little bit of a complex setup, but I've made a whole clonable that demonstrates that principle. So here, this is Rive BG, as it's called. This is in my list of resources. And this blob in the background is following the cursor, and it's all the different vector points of it that are following it. But you can do all kinds of examples as well with, like, a little character following it around or anything like that. There's ways of doing this kind of in Rive as well as with Webflow. This there's a little bit probably too in depth to get into, but yeah, you can absolutely do that kind of thing. In this case, this is one Rive file that's got that follow on. It's also got like these colorful pipes growing, and it's also got like properties that change in the Rive file that allow me to switch between day and night mode that are also changing Webflow things. So you can really integrate like IX2 stuff with the Rive file as well. And yeah, there's a full like 20-minute breakdown of how I made this on YouTube, so you can follow that as well.
Nice.
A little bit more concise than this explanation probably, but I also did an example with some tabs, which is just like a very simple Rive animation up here, and then whenever you switch, oh, that actually isn't working. Okay, maybe that's broken. But the idea is whenever you switch the tabs, it changes the animation as well. And then, yeah, I think I probably need to start wrapping up. So I'll just switch to this sort of closing stuff.
We know that guy.
We do. So is it useful? So Ransigal says this is one of the web design fads that will not trend in 2025, along with Spline, subscription agencies, AR and VR and AI. So sorry, I'm afraid it's no use to anyone. No, of course, he's entitled to his opinion, but I happen to disagree. I think that I think it's really useful. The main use cases I found for it are like hero animations, interactive background stuff, icons, illustrations. For a lot of people, have a lot of vector illustrations on their site and making that interesting, and doing stuff with sound. Like I've never really had a great way to integrate sound into interactions in Webflow, so I really like using it for that. I think that like GSAP still has a lot of merits as well, obviously, and I think that that's best for like progressive enhancement, as Cassie told me it's called. Like so you can actually, when you're manipulating elements in the DOM and text and making sure it's accessible, GSAP is great for that. But Rive for like these sort of set pieces, I think is fantastic. And for me, like it's a designer friendly environment. It's all visual, which is the way that I think. You have that state machine, which we touched a little bit on, but you can get really complex with. And once that starts to click, like it's very intuitive to use. It's cross-platform, so you can, if you make assets for a web project and then your client wants to make an app as well, then you can just use the same assets. And you can also, you have this transferable skill set. If you want to move into game development or into app stuff, like you can take your Rive skills with you. And I think it's a really fun and composable environment. And by that, I mean, like I have, as a non-developer, started to unlock developer-like thinking, because you're like really using a state machine and thinking it in terms of like inputs, booleans and number inputs and all of that stuff. There's like a bunch of different ways you can solve a problem. Like you can conceptualize an idea in different ways. Like I've had some conversations with Jeff McAvoy, shout out again, where like we've had 2 or 3 different ways that you could execute an idea. And I think that really demonstrates that it's like more than just the kind of no code tool that people are disparaging about. And it really allows you to get into proper development space.
We have an interesting, well, we have a question in the chat from Carla, and she says, would you say Rive is geared more towards designers? So I'm thinking maybe a designer would design the animation and then pass it on to the Webflow developer to integrate on the site.
Yeah, I think it depends where your skills lie, I guess. Like I'm somewhere in between those things. So I kind of like doing all of it, but the place where I'm seeing interest from other people. So the other reason I think that this is useful is because in the last 2 months, I've also been asked to do like 5 or I think 6 now paid jobs with it, and I'm making a decent amount of money for it.
And was that comprehensive of the whole site, or were you just requested to do the small animation parts?
So people are asking generally for like just animate like individual animation things at the moment, where they've like already built the assets and they're just like, I want to make this thing more interesting. But having done a couple of those with people, they're now thinking like, okay, next time, how can I like include this in my pitch at the beginning? And yeah, for the sake of transparency, I've done stuff that's between like 250 and £2,000 so far for just like Rive animations. Um, and I have heard from some people that they'd be interested in like including it in projects which could be like uh, several times that basically in the new year. So I'm really bullish on it. I mean, it seems to be working well for me, and I hadn't even really tried to advertise that as a service yet. I don't have a website. I don't have a web page for my Rive services or anything, and this stuff is just coming in as a result of me sharing a few things on socials. So
Mm.
yeah, I think it has a lot of potential. And I don't know if I fully answered the question, but I think that it's definitely more designer friendly, but you want to be technically minded or into kind of like really getting into that composable environment and thinking like a developer, which I think will work for a lot of Webflow people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I wonder if we do have one last question from anyone here watching the presentation today before we wrap up, because we have time for one question. Don't be shy.
If there's not one, then I will just once again mention this because I didn't actually. So Jeff McAvoy was like the pioneer of using Rive stuff within Webflow before that we even had like the proper integration. And there's still a lot of really great stuff on his site, which is Riveflow, and he has this little Rumple character. And this is a really useful resource, and I think Jeff is trying to do more as well, and he has a lot of like YouTube videos and things, and he's also just like super nice guy. And I've been on a call with him before, and he'll just help you with stuff. So and you can do the same with me. You know, please do get in touch if you're trying to build stuff and you're not sure. I'm happy to chat with you. But yeah, also if for some more advanced things, you might need to bother Jeff. And he also explains how to use the JS runtime, which is something that I'm trying to get into now, because then you're able to do some things that aren't in the integration. So yeah, really recommend checking out all of his stuff and just following him. He's on my big list of people which I'm going to keep building as well. There are some really great, like they're still fairly early days, even though they've added so many features. I'm really impressed with how quickly they're moving. But like Guido, who's the CEO, will like respond and chat on Twitter and things like that. So it's very accessible at this point. And yeah, there's a bunch of just
name.
really cool people. Sorry?
It's got such an Italian name, Guido. Guido.
Yeah, I think maybe it is Italian. I don't know. I don't want to
California. Yeah, I don't know. Definitely something in the blood. Oh, that's amazing, Joshua. Thank you so much. For bringing Rive into the community. As mentioned, it was definitely something that we've been meaning to explore for a while now, and I love the possibilities. I think you're right. There's a huge chance for us to pick up these tools, create content around it. As you mentioned, you started getting clients just by sharing on LinkedIn what you've been doing. You don't even have it on your website right now, and that's the key. And it's something new.
Yeah.
I know that people, for example, I've been admiring professionals that use Figma, right, to create animations, which for me was just like way too like far out in the universe. I was like, how can you create, design, draw an animation on Figma? But there's people that do crazy stuff, and I feel like Rive or similar tools could help you achieve those results in a much more friendly environment. And so yeah, that could be great. And if anyone here gives it a go, please share it in the community. We'll make sure that we share your content out there as well. It'd be nice to have a little challenge. So Joshua, if you would like to do a Christmas advent calendar with Rive animations, that'd be fun.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, I'd love to see people have a go at that nesting thing, which I didn't get a chance to explain, but maybe I can drop a little bonus video of how to set that up, because it's really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. And for everyone else here, thank you so much for sticking around as well. And Rachel, you do have a last burning question, or just was an accident? Okay, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I think this is the last stream before, the end of the year. So I just wanted to take the chance to say thank you all for sticking around, for 2024 here together. It's been such a pleasure to have you here as always, and I hope to see you all back, in the new year, 2025. We'll keep on hanging in our gather, but enough with the streams, just our wholesome networking. All right. Well, Joshua, thank you so much for making the time again. We'd love to have you back. I'll see what happened with the audio, but at least everyone here in the events was able to hear you and get the value that you brought to the stream. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to share this stuff with you, and yeah, I'll follow me on wherever, and I'll be sharing more things. So, and please do get in touch if you want to know anything.
Stalk the fry.
And also, like, try and get Rive to send me some merch, because I have my spline merch and I have my GSAT badges, but I haven't managed to convince them to give me anything yet. So start a campaign, #merch for Josh.
Okay, I'll do that. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.